Podcasts, The Final Frontier. These are the voyages of the Bloodwine boys and their friends. Their continuing mission? To watch Star Trek and tell you about it.
Bloodwine boys! Bloodwine boys! Bloodwine boys! Bloodwine boys!
But we can keep talking.
Well, in fact, the whole aim of us is to keep talking.
No. It's been a week, Brian. It's been a whole week of time that has passed.
It's just a vibe. We just have to. We're just gonna vibe for the rest of the day.
Oh yeah, no, we're
Good
here
vibes.
again. I'm Alex Fleming. I'm here with Brian Polk,
Hi.
Philip Bowen,
Oh, that's me.
and Kenny from the Movements podcast.
What up?
Great. No fun bits this time. We're down to business. We spent a whole episode just centering ourselves. Honestly, one of my favorite experiences recording that of all time. A true pleasure. But now it is time to go into the pale moonlight.
I've decided I'm going to do a heel turn this entire app. You have to convince me. Wait.
You're going to be our free neck?
I'm going to be, well, possibly. But for now, I'm going to be like, Cisco did a cool thing. So to me, this episode is Cisco has a cool idea. He enlists his cool friend Garrett, who has an even cooler idea.
Yep.
They collaborate on a great idea. They successfully execute that cool idea, and their mission is accomplished. Like, all's fair in love and war, and I didn't really get any. I don't know. I didn't have any moral quandaries like Cisco was having when I was watching this episode. I don't know.
Were we not supposed to take that position? Because I'm
We're talking so much about imperialism, and it's just we don't actually talk about the Bajor at all in this episode. This is pure uncut.
The Bajor question.
Yeah, this is pure uncut geopolitics, baby. This is brinkmanship. To me, what was amazing to me about the episode is how straightforward it is, how it just drives like this freight train right through the narrative. But we can back up and talk about how it's framed as a personal log and all that stuff before that. But I just wanted to throw that out there. I wanted to throw out my possibly not very hot take out there that this episode rules, and Cisco is a cool guy. He's only made cooler by his association with super spy Garrick, who I imagine is at one point rappelling down in a deep place. He's rappelling
down the Jeffries tubes.
Down the Jeffries tube to get into a Romulan shuttlecraft. In a awesome bit of spycraft that we absolutely don't see.
I wonder if the moral quandary would be if the moral quandary would be more of a quandary for me with this episode if like I cared. This
about
is going to sound
Tolar.
This is going to sound really fictionally racist, but like Romulans, I'm just not that. The Romulans have always kind of sucked. Romulans are always a stand-in bad guy. If Cisco had like betrayed a Vulcan or something like that, I wonder if it would feel more. If the stakes would feel higher to me than him killing a Romulan who was a jerk to him. And he didn't even do it. It's just the plan went off, and it was great. It did what it needed.
I think for me, what is interesting about this episode, related to what both of you just mentioned, and like, should we feel bad about it? What would make us feel more ambiguous or negative towards what happened? Is the question of like, under what circumstances is it allowed to, like, when does the ends justify the means? You can be absolutist about it and say it never does. Or you can be like, I don't know, you can be like Stalin and be like, it always does. I think for me, what was interesting was like if we wanted to talk about like intelligence plots, like spycraft, like Garrick stuff.
Yeah, I love
Garrick
Garrick stuff.
is a Garrick clearly like his approach towards solving this problem that Cisco brought to him. I mean, it's very much in the Cardassian political culture to be like, yeah, just lie and cheat and steal and bribe and like it's no big deal.
Yeah,
He
you
was
want to
guilty
open the
from
door,
the
we'll
beginning.
walk on through it.
Right. And I think like if they were if the Federation was doing this, like never mind if it was a Romulan or a Vulcan or whoever, but like if they were doing this for the goal of just like colonizing or controlling another system or what have you, like then it would be like, well, yeah, don't do that. Like that's America shit. That's what the US does. I think what made this more interesting was that this was done in response to a literal fascist invasion.
Yeah.
And like in a really bad situation where they're losing militarily. Maybe if somebody wants to do, the legwork to figure out all the details of the Dominion War and make a case that they could have found another way of winning the war and defeating the Dominion. But I think when you're fighting a genocidal slave society that's invading you and like has every indication that they will continue to keep invading, I think you got to do what you got to do.
Well,
And
Britain did this
hold on.
to the U.S. in World
Wait,
War II.
wait. I got to interject and I got to put my
Okay.
initial reactions in here because I know it's gonna get so spicy and good and I love it already. But I'm sorry, but Commander Cisco started this war. That is why he is. No, I just looked this
You're
up. I
right.
was like,
Yeah.
how did it start? And it's because when the Klingons stage their surprise attack on Cardassia, because they think that the Cardassian Empire is showing its weakness by allowing its former colonies to be able to stand up to it like this. And so the Klingons strike, and what happens? The Cardassians make an alliance with the Dominion at that point. They were not previously allied, and it breaks the United Federation of Planets alliance with the Romulans that they were about to have, which is what this whole episode ends up being about. And like we almost had the trading of cloak technology, which I think is really more of the sort of like nuke reference in a lot of this stuff. Like, I think there's a sort of a comparison to like how how did the Klingons get cloaking technologies because the dirty spycraft of the
and the
Romulans.
cloaking technology is also used to like to place
For
mines along the wormhole, right? And in another point in this series as well. So,
but so when I just did a quick Google and I'm looking at a very long message, a very long Reddit post in the Daystrom Institute about how the first time Cisco like it goes up to the Jem'Hadar, they're basically like, go away. Actually, I've got the transcript right here. It says, Tlak Talan, I guess it must be a Jem'Hadar, says, Commander Cisco will serve as an example to what happens to anyone who interferes with the Dominion. Kira, what kind of interference are you talking about? Tlak Talan, coming through the anomaly is interference enough. Unless you wish to continue to offend the Dominion, I suggest you stay on your side of the galaxy. And Dax says, you're making a mistake if you think detaining Commander Cisco will stop us from exploring the Gamma Quadrant. So, I mean, yes,
she's using the word explore.
Exploration is a bad word that does
that word's doing a lot of
colonize is the other part of that, right? I mean,
yeah,
Federation explores to create colonies, and
that's the quiet
part. But are they settler colonies? And like
the Federation very clearly is a settler colony. I mean, they make a point of trying to find places that do not have previous inhabitants, but they do,
and that have a lot of material resources.
Yes.
They're like, okay, this planet, the bees will kill you, but they have a lot of shiny gems. We're gonna just put you down here with anti-bee protocols. Those are gonna collapse in like 5 years, and we'll go.
They only do settler colonialism when it's like when it's a planet that like phases out of existence for 300 years, or is all Irish people.
I I got to push back a little bit, Alex, though, because I take your point there. Especially we have Star Trek glasses, so like it's easy to assume everything the Federation does is like a benevolent mistake or something
But
like that.
also, I have to
But
concede that at that point, like once you're at that point of the provoking the Dominion and they are coming, like I find it hard to fault Cisco in this episode.
Well, the thing is like that was what I wanted to push back on is like you said that Cisco started the war, and I don't remember. I only rewatched this one episode. But did literally he provoke them just by entering the Gamma Quadrant or the Gamma Quadrant?
Yeah. So I mean, I would have to consult more sources.
It's complicated,
really, but
it's also tied into all the Odo stuff.
Yeah,
that's
right. True.
So the origin of the war is very confusing. But you could say Cisco started it.
I think I can say unambiguously though that like the Federation is not a slave society, and in the way that Dominion is, certainly.
Yeah,
that's true. That's also very true.
And I think the Dominion
should we be doing nation building in the Gamma Quadrant is the question.
I mean, but were they even doing nation building in the Gamma Quadrant? I think the whole point was they were just trying to like they have this wormhole and people keep coming through the wormhole and like sure, let's trade, let's meet people, but like I think the Dominions were the ones who establish that like you either have to pay fealty to them or they'll destroy you, because they have a supremacist ideology that all solids will destroy them.
I think that's true. I think from the narrative, we mostly think the whole time that, yeah, it's obvious that Dominion's not going to stop. The Romulans are being stupid if they think they are going to be left alone as like as an ally or non-aggression, with this non-aggression pact, with Germany, with the Dominion, right? Like if they're the only ones left in the Alpha Quadrant. I think we as the audience know that.
I think even Vreenak knows that his public position of being for the alliance with the Dominion, it's for public consumption, but privately in his conversation with Cisco, I think he sort of subtly, not so subtly, implies that alliance is they're buying time.
Right.
That they are under no illusions that in the long run they are going to be, as Cisco puts it, surrounded by the Dominion, facing the same opponent on every side once they take the Cleons and they take the Federation and whatnot. And so he says that there's a word for that, surrounded. And what does Vreenak say? He says he's talking about the Romulan ale from the replicator. He just says it really is a good replica. And then he comments a little bit on the Romulan ale, and then he mentions, yeah, you made some good points. I think that's Romulan speak for, listen, you're right, but going to war is just going to cause the problem sooner. We don't really know what we're going to do, but we're just trying to buy time here. At least that's how I interpreted that scene.
So this is
I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Sorry.
This is fine. Great. We're also invested in this, and so I took the opportunity while you were talking to pull up the memory alpha, so we can at least get some baseline historical facts anchoring us in the war, like in our previous episode. So in 2370, first contact is officially made with the Federation and the Dominion when the Jem'Har destroy the USS Odyssey, and then there's a state of Cold War from that point. And it is known that the founders are driven by a xenophobic need to exert absolute authority over all civilizations. The reference for that is DS9, The Search Part 2, according to Memory Alpha. But so it starts off in this sort of, I'm getting World War II vibes way, and definitely the Cold War propaganda. What everyone in the Vietnam doc I was talking about, the way they talked about communist aggression, of a force that is a fantastically evil force. And this is something I brought up at the very beginning, which is, I think, is a fantasy in a lot of ways. Very rarely do we actually get, and maybe, feel free to smack down this whack-a-mole if you can really come up with a great example. But when other than the Nazis, who really is an expansionist fascist, like actually sees everyone as, I don't know, maybe what
Sauron and all his greed and malice.
that's true.
Sauron
But
is the
Sauron
correct
also
answer.
Hitler?
Well, I think this is your point is well made, but and I think the comparison to the American imagination of like sort of the evil communist influence is incredibly apt, because ultimately I think the Dominion are the aggressors in this war because in that state of Cold War they infiltrated everyone's like home planet and really freaked everybody out, right? Like they did some serious like sabotage and impersonating of world leaders and shit before this episode has happened, before the hot war actually begins, right? So to me, that is actually the scariest part of the Dominion, and it does kind of sound like this Joe McCarthy shit of like they've infiltrated our highest ranks, and I think that is purposefully done, but also it means that the Dominion is definitely kind of like as bad as it sounds, right, in this particular context.
There's a Cisco quote here from Call to Arms from DS9. This is from Memory Alpha. We're losing the peace, which means a war could be our only hope.
Oh.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
one
Kenny.
thing that
sorry.
I was just going to say that I think for me, like when you're using the comparison of the Cold War is for example, the United States throughout the Cold War had all this propaganda about like how much in danger we were from communism, the McCarthy reference that you just made and whatnot. But so much of it wasn't true, just wasn't true, wasn't even, close to true. And in this case, you have a situation, and, every authoritarian or, whatever entity is going to claim that they are under great threat. That's like how you rationalize everything. As Picard says in that one episode, a matter of internal security, the cry of the oppressor. But, and again, this is where I talk about like the writer's room being people from the Imperial Corps. And why I find this episode so interesting is this is a situation where like, no, they really are under a threat that like any American who's like, maybe if you're old enough to remember the Civil War, you can remember a legitimate threat to the United States on an existential level. But otherwise, like, we don't actually know what that's like. And in this episode, in DS9, you get to see the Federation really grapple with how do you maintain, what makes the United Federation of Planets worth living and worth existing. How do you reconcile that with like real legitimate existential threat?
One of the things that I think is so interesting about this episode is we're so used to comparing the Federation and the United States, and if you're looking at this this episode through that Cold War lens, the Federation is comparable to the United States. But if you're looking at it through the World War II lens, I think the Romulans are what is applicable to the United States. Like the plot of it, England was forging documents. They ended up not needing to do them, but England was trying to convince Americans that Hitler had a plan to send troops up into the U.S. through Mexico. Like England did this
wasn't this an intercepted cable? Like
that's World War I.
The Atlantic.
Yeah,
right. That's the Zimmerman telegraph from telegram from or something from World War One.
That's definitely what I'm thinking of.
The Zimmerman telegram is definitely World War One.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of the Zimmerman telegram. But they also it was part of their two-pronged plan, which they also had. England had famous like literary people and celebs of their time actively sleeping with the wives of U.S. senators to try to convince them to go into the war. Famously, Roald Dahl was one of
That's awesome.
And there's possibly an anachronistic record of him calling his handler and being like, you know, I have to stop. I just can't stand sleeping with her anymore. And his supervisor was, please, you do it for your country. And I just, yeah.
Lay back and think of Britain.
Yeah. But, you know, there was all this effort to convince the United States to get involved in the war. And but for a long time, a lot of America was not that worried about Hitler. There was a lot of German sympathizers in the U.S., and so that kind of waffling and the way they brought the Romulans into the war made me think of America. And so it's just interesting to me that there's these two historical lenses where in one the Federation is America, in another the Romulans are, and we're looking at them at the same time.
Yeah. Okay, here's the thing. What is the plan, though, from Garrick's point of view, right? Like, because this is why I love the plan. The plan works on several different levels. And I think the first time I watched this years ago, I was really surprised by the end. Like, I didn't see it coming. But there's also a way in which, like, when do we think Garrick decides to blow up this Romulan senator's plane, but blow up his shuttlecraft? Because
that's
honestly,
such a fun question.
It makes sense.
I think about that.
Yeah, it makes sense. The straightforward version of this plan makes sense. Oh, the most prominent, I can trick the most prominent pro-Dominion Romulan senator to make a secret trip to a Federation like station. I'll just kill him. Like that's good for me, because now his pro-Dominion voice is out. And if I can make it look like the Dominion did it, then I am really home free. So I just wanted to bring that up. When does Garrett,
Oh yeah, I think that was his plan the whole time. And
from the second that Sisko asked about the Cardassian data rod, I think that's when he was like, no one's gonna be able to tell because it's gonna be damaged from
Yeah, I think by the second conversation between Sisko and Garrick, I think he knows what the plan is. I think when Sisko first approaches him, I think he just, at that point, he hasn't had time to think about it. But I think once Garrick sat down and took a few hours to think through the options,
made a few phone calls, and all those people he called died.
Yeah.
If that even happened for real.
Yes, good point.
We don't know.
Yeah. Oh God.
And that's the thing about spycraft. Like if you have like a more low key intelligence apparatus where like your intelligence people are not charged and not given empowered to do really black ops clandestine stuff, there's this sort of, you don't necessarily have to worry about this as much. But if you're dealing with a Cardassian spy, like the gnarliest of the gnarly of intelligence services that exist in this universe, like those are the kind of people who this is their trade, is deception, not just of like the targets of the rivals, but deceiving even their own like civilian oversight. I forget exactly.
I mean,
how
it's
the
Garrett.
Cardassian system
He's not
works.
with. There's a reason he got expelled from Cardassia. You know what I mean? Like Garrick's the slippery of the slipperiest.
Yeah.
Or was that all an op to get Garrick embedded on DS9 from the very beginning?
I mean, yes, but probably not, because Garrick kind of turns out to be more of a partisan, right? Like he's a real he's a spy with like a, I don't know, nationalist streak to him.
Yeah. It's like he used to believe in something.
Yeah.
He used to waterboard people for the Obsidian Order, right?
Allegedly.
Okay, so
I would love to see a Zero Dark 30 starring Garrick.
Oh my God.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to.
He's just clomping around in heels, playing on whiteboards.
A few notes at the very beginning. So this is Stardate 5172, 5172.1.3, which is significant because they show Sisko wrestling with the moral weight of what he's done. He can't quite recall what day it is when he's doing this. And then the place that he starts the story is the whole reason he's motivated is because he keeps seeing people dying every Friday when he posts the lists of casualties. First of all, there's a part of me that just thinks it's very funny to make the association of that's like, okay, so war equals death equals Friday. Just to compartmentalize it that
Friday.
way.
He does, yeah. He's like, I hate Fridays, like a bizarro Garfield.
And I think now again we're like the American public of 1967, where we haven't been paying attention to what's been going on in Vietnam for the last 10 years. We just know that we got to stop Dominion aggression, and it doesn't matter how it ended up coming towards us. And now we are just
stay the course.
So we're and Cisco, especially if he's involved in the series of decisions that led us down the path of widening the war, or at least coming into conflict with, and this is always the question of exploration in Star Trek. It's like eventually you run into a Borg or a Dominion or something, right? That's kind of
so
problem.
nonchalant. With exploration, eventually you run into a Dominion or a Borg or something.
It's going to try to absorb you, and it's going to hate, your disorder, and it's going to try to impose perfect order. And yes.
Yes. Yeah, basically like main villain syndrome, But so that gets us where we are here, where Cisco he's got to not only not stop the conflict, because this is the Dominion we're talking about. So he's got to win this war, right? And this is what leads him to the idea that if we can get the Romulans involved, he goes to Garrick. And that's where we sort of found ourselves. I just thought there was a little bit of a prologue in there that I thought was just part of why this episode is so goddamn well written, that I didn't want to take notes the whole time. I just was loving every moment of it. What happens next?
Garrick suggests this second conversation we're talking about, or maybe it's the third, because Garrick, again, like we said, had to explain to Cisco that as soon as he contacted people on Cardassia, they were killed within a day of him talking to them. And he goes like, isn't that funny? And then eventually he's like, we have to manufacture this evidence of the Dominion with planning to invade Romulus ourselves, right? In an elevator, in a long, nice elevator scene.
Oh yeah, they paused the elevator on the way to the bridge, right? Something like that. It's a little,
possibly. As I said that, I'm like, maybe that's a different scene. I have no idea. But like, Cisco is like, maybe I should have put a stop to it right there, but I didn't want to. I should have forgotten the whole thing, but I didn't. And it's great because a lot of times it sounds like this episode could have started with like record scratch. Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got in this situation. Because that's like inevitably what you hear like after Act 1 of a movie, where it's like, maybe I should have forgotten the whole thing, but God damn it, I went to summer camp. And
summer camp on Cardassia is not the same.
I think what we don't see is the way in which they invite Senator Vreenak to the secret meeting. I was talking about Garrick being a super spy. He certainly, and that happens later. But first, somebody, the Starfleet bigwigs have to, approve of them having this like secret rendezvous with the Senator on Deep Space Nine that no one can know about. Like, that to me is, if there is a plot hole somewhere, it's the suggestion that there isn't already a Tal Shiar guy on the station, like,
ooh, yeah,
like who would see Senator Vreenak and know that he went on this trip to Deep Space Nine. Because otherwise, if you blow up his ship, at Deep Space Nine, that's totally different than blowing up his ship when he's on the way back for meeting with the Dominion.
What think about that Tal Shiar penetration?
I also realize it's Garrick who suggests Vreenak in the first place, right? He's like, well,
Yes.
Vreenak's gonna be close by. There could have, I guess, kind of to your point, like there could have been other people that he could have met with. Probably, it just seemed. It just made me wonder how far back Garrick engineered this plan, since he was the one who put Vreenak up for it in the first place.
Well, and then how does Quark and that Klingon political prisoner get involved? There's so much plot in this episode.
There's a lot of plot. There's
Not
a
a
lot
lot
of
of
plot.
character. Lots of plot.
What I enjoyed about those subplots with what's his name? Tolar,
Yeah.
Tolar.
and also Quark for that matter. Spies and like underworld, like sketchy people involved in illegal trades, and like they go together. Like I love that, like when Cisco mentions that Garrick is involved in this operation, and suddenly he's like, wait, Garrick is here? Like
He's
clearly
terrified.
they've clearly done work together, or at least like are enough professional in the same professional colleague circles
Yeah.
that like the lore of Garrick is enough to freak him the hell out.
I'm pretty sure by this point in time, there have been several episodes where Garrick has held Quark at phaser point, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Garrick is scary, and it's always great when a character comes in and is immediately freaked out. Just by the idea of being in the same station as Garrick, he is terrified. But like you're saying, it would be just as if he's discarded by Garrick at the end of this episode to a permanent end. But it's funny to imagine, just as likely he could have been, I don't know, groomed by Starfleet intelligence until he assassinates someone. Like
it's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah.
In my notes when I was rewatching it, I actually wrote down something about like, another way this episode could have been written is where you had Quark becoming like a Jack Ruby type of character.
he is Jack Ruby.
The sketchy, like connected, like nightclub owner type
Oh
of
my
character
God.
who like has to tie up the loose end.
Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah. Wow, I'll buy it.
So anyway,
I wanna see-
Jack Ruby, instead of being the shooter, he gets stabbed instead, right? So like Grathon Tolar stabs Quark in a dispute. And that is when Cisco starts to have like moral doubts, but the urgency
Not
of
when
Beta
Wait,
Z.
not when Quark is like, I knew I always believed in the 98th rule of acquisition. That you could bribe me. Quark's so happy to be bribed by Cisco.
It's my favorite part of the episode, I think. He's like a proud papa. He looks at Cisco, he's like, oh my God, you were a bribe? Like he's genuinely touched. Right? Like that's so nice of Cisco to do. Like he's finally, showing some like Ferengi values. I think it's like this is the best moment like Quark has, but maybe in the entire series. Almost.
It was definitely powerful. But yeah, so sorry, I didn't care at all about Quark getting stabbed. I just thought that was a fun moment. Yeah, why does he get stabbed? Because Tolar just gets drunk and is wild?
Tolar wants to like dance with one of the Dabo girls or something.
The Dabo girl is busy.
I have to imagine that on some level, like, I mean, whatever, he's probably always a little bit of a sleazeball kind of guy. But on some level, I almost wonder if like this is the kind of guy who's always expecting to be killed eventually and just sort of like lives a little crazy because he did, I mean, when you're involved in these sorts of trades, these underground trades, it's very high stress. And like there's a lot of like CIA assets, the shit that we know about. A lot of those people had serious substance abuse issues and like other types of really serious like addictions or like sort of pathological behavior.
Plus he just got out of Klingon jail where, who knows if they actually abide by Federation procedures there.
Klingon jail's gotta suck.
Well, literally he said like they told me they were going to execute me every day. Like, I mean, that would actually be considered a war crime.
On the-
like fake executions, convincing someone they're about to be executed. Like
Yes.
that's illegal in international law.
Wow.
on the other
Not
hand, though, I
Klingon
feel
law.
like Klingon jail could be super comfortable to shame them. Like just like really fluffy pillows and couches, just like taking away their honor. They get a squishmallow to hold. I think Klingon prison could be like the nicest place in Klingon.
That's probably where they send Klingons, but not other folks.
That's adorable. That's really adorable.
The
Yeah.
ballroom with him.
So I'm convinced
No.
that Grathon Tolar is Lee Harvey Oswald and Quark is Jack Ruby now. And
Yeah, there's a
right.
little bit of that.
Yeah, an unstable CIA asset. But like essentially the plan that we have is like it's all staked on the perfectness of this recording and the fact that like Cardassian data like can't be tampered with, right? And just to kind of linearly move through the episode, we also need to do another war crime. We have to sell biomimetic gel
Oh
to
yeah.
a supplier, right? We have to and I
Did
love
we ever
this
find
because
out what happened to that? Like I don't remember
no,
it
it
ever
got
coming up
used
again.
for exactly what Bashir said it would be used, which was pyogenic weapons, organic explosives, and something else that I can't quite remember. Like it's just war crime
Is it
central.
specifically
Yeah.
referenced again, or because I assume that's correct, but is it
Yeah,
specifically
yeah.
referenced again?
You mean later in Star Trek? I don't know, but I would just assume that like, yeah, they like sold it to the Maquis or something like that. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
Some war crimey.
that had some strong like Iran Contra Gary Webb Dark Alliance energy to me. That little stuff.
Biomimetic gel is just cocaine.
Yeah.
Well, what was interesting about it, right? I mean, I'm always interested in the sort of slight nods to hard science that or hard sci-fi that Star Trek does make, and they tried to explain it as being like it's basically like stem cells, right? It's like gelled stem cells. It was a substance that could become in any other organic substance that it was like next to.
Yes.
I believe so. Yeah, I mean, definitely the sort of stuff you usually have controlled, especially with what we know about the gene wars being always a part of Star Trek canon, both in the original series and then later on. There always seems to be some sort of, genetic World War III where Khan gets to be in canon.
Yeah, so it's specifically like against the values of the Federation, right? Because it enables like genetic enhancement and all these stuff that we know that the Federation doesn't allow. And it's funny, and Bashir, who himself is genetically enhanced, also it kind of has to point out like in the wrong hands, these are just biologic. This is just a biological weapon. So
Exactly.
you are forcing me to like hand over a biological weapon to the state or to some buyer. And all Bashir can really, I like that he got to do it, and I like that he got to formally protest or whatever, but that's all it ultimately came to. He's like, I'll be noting this on my log.
I think that scene in particular made me think of like how much of a digital paper trail that left by being like, I'm going to issue a formal complaint and I want it noted in writing this order. And then, the point earlier about like, there's got to be some sort of Tal Shiar asset on DS9. And so like those sorts of little potential compromises in the operational security of this plot, like makes me think like probably wasn't enough for the plot to not work, but is probably enough that like some sort of Federation truther at some point is going to have some sort of podcast where he starts revealing the plot that the Vreenak assassination was an inside job.
Oh,
there was a second Klingon.
When Section 31 outwardly has their own podcast, that's going to be so wild.
Oh man, you almost made me spit take, dude.
Section 31
gosh.
writes a song called "Winds of Change" for. Sorry.
I mean, I don't know if you guys saw there is a Langley podcast.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it, but have you?
No, I haven't.
Is it just the feds running a podcast?
Yeah. Linkley's got a podcast now. Everyone's got a podcast.
I mean, it's just the natural, outcome, considering the CIA was really into hiring novelists and actors to do a lot of their propaganda. It makes total sense.
Well, CIA, if you're listening, I am looking for a job.
So
Yeah, no, we are in the market for sponsors.
Yeah. Now listen to Bloodwine Boys, brought to you by Raytheon.
Speaking of the CIA, this plan doesn't work. In fact,
Yeah, no.
blows up in his face. He has that conversation we talked about before with Freenac, and then he kind of has to twiddle his thumbs and says the souffle will either rise or it won't. Right, quoting his dad. There's not a damn thing you can do about it. When he's talking about waiting around for, he's shown Freenac the beautiful little holographic scene, which is very fun, just to have what's his face, Jeffrey Combs, in there, getting to be in the scene. I would love if all secret recordings were fully 3D, just holodeck experiences. That would be really fun. And it felt kind of fun and goofy and silly in a good Star Trek way. And then we're just kind of waiting around to see if the Romulans are actually going to figure out if it's a fake. And he's like, oh, and they might also actually declare war on us. That would be bad.
Yeah.
Sure enough. And then we get I think one of the moments I've seen memed the most, of any Star Trek episode it's a fake.
Yeah.
It's a fake.
I have not.
I get excited every time that scene happens.
It's a fake.
So Vreenek goes back and is assassinated, and it's just nicely wrapped up like that. Is that what proceeds from that point?
It all blows up in his face, but Vreenak just turns around and gets back on the shuttle, and then they find out 2 days later that the shuttle exploded. And since there's no record of him going to DS9, basically he just left this Dominion meeting and his ship blew up. And the Romulans, because I think to bring it back to a bunch of the conversations we were having earlier, the CIA was always well, if we're doing this bad stuff, imagine what the Russians are doing, right? We've heard on our leftist podcasts and so forth that's kind of the gist of how they work themselves up into imagining this horrible monster that was doing worse stuff than they were.
Yeah.
Right. But because that's kind of the Romulan nature, is to actually do all that stuff. And they're pretty, it's kind of fun now to have them around, as a paranoid species that will do all that stuff. They're oh yeah, of course the Dominions gonna try to kill us. That's what we would do. And then
I would just push back and say, I don't know that we have a whole lot of sociological data about what regular Romulans are like.
You're right.
And usually what we're engaging with is the high level political culture.
Yes.
But to that point, their political culture is absolutely really shady and deceptive and prone to I mean, I just love that first scene with Vreenak where he just immediately starts exuding disdain for Cisco and the Federation from that very moment they first encounter each other.
Very Romulan.
It's very much in the Romulan political culture.
That's a good point. And just because we also don't really we imagine that regular Cardassians are not as incredibly delighted to be here and fascist as the Cardassians that we see on a daily basis in this show.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I just had an image of the Cardassian QAnon shaman now. The version of that would exist on Cardassia.
Right. Well, that's what happens at the end. They overthrow the deep state at the end. At the end of the whole series, right? Cardassia, finally.
Oh yeah. Cardassia becomes free, right? God, we've been talking for such a long time.
Yeah.
And there's still so much rich detail in this episode, but I think we're gonna need to have to wrap it up.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to Cisco hitting Garrick in the face.
Oh my God.
I mean, that was
let's-
just great acting, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's
Oh,
not
yeah.
so much to say about it other than like Garrick's brilliant monologue when, explaining why he had to do it and Cisco was too scared to really, I don't know, fully commit. Like, isn't that why you called me in the first place? You wanted to do stuff that you couldn't do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got like Kennedy and vibes around the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kind of a feeling from that, or more sort of Bay of Pigs. I forget which sources during my JFK obsession period I was thinking of, but I just think about the amount of pressure to be harder on Russia and on the Reds that he was getting, and the feeling of sort of like his that the advisors are running away with the show, or trying to at least, and God, that even extends so much more further into the present with all these war hawks just champing at the bit constantly. But then it's like,
except we're on the side of Garrick and Cisco.
Right.
And I think that's the thing is like, and to my point earlier is that we're seeing people engage in plotting and committing crimes in response to a real threat. And the point about the CIA guys rationalize to themselves by being like, well, if what we're doing bad, like the KGB is clearly, and the Russians are clearly much worse. But like, if I think if they had actually been doing any like serious self-reflection, which I don't think those people like your Howard Hunts and your David Atlee Phillips, like, no, they were doing it because one, it was fun to a lot of them. And it was a great use of their skills. And they were just whole pieces of garbage. Whereas Cisco, say what we will about his waffling and his contradicting himself throughout this entire episode, I think he genuinely feels conflicted about what he's doing while understanding like that it has to be done. It's a very different situation. It's like they're using some of the tools that like an organization like the CIA would use, but they're not using it to fund death squads. Like, it just, it's I think for me, it's a fascinating example of like, what would it look like if like actually the CIA was actually trying to preserve freedom and democracy? It would look something like this.
and that's why I mentioned at the beginning about how the Dominion is this,
Absolute evil.
existential threat. Yeah, this absolute evil that is real, and that's part of the fun of the fantasy of
Yeah.
this is
And it's fantastic. It's a fantasy, but it's also, reminds you kind of like you walk away from it thinking like, yeah, war is bad. And I think that war is bad, but like, in the way that you might watch like The Dirty Dozen and be like, yeah, I guess, that is sad that all those sacrifices happen, but in war, like nothing is off the table is feels like sort of a message that you're getting, at least from Cisco, saying that he can live with it. And obviously there's a little bit of doubt in his voice, but he's like, he says, I can live with it twice.
Yeah.
Because I think
he's made his mind up.
Yeah, he has.
And that is, I think, what is so admirable about Cisco in this, and part of why that monologue is so good, that soliloquy, is because he has made this decision a long time ago, back when whatever happened with him and the Dominion when they first encountered, like, this is the culmination of all of that. And the souffle either rises or it doesn't, And he already put the ingredients in, and in this case, it rose.
Yeah. So we can all agree this episode's just all about souffles. Yeah.
It's the best ending. I raised my arms up in the air when it ended. The
Mhm.
just him saying erase that entire personal log,
Yeah.
Oh
just
yeah.
cut to black is so good. You're just it kind of takes your breath away. I'm stunned.
I think what part of what's so cool about it is even in this science fiction universe where there is an ultimate evil that will stop at nothing and is the embodiment of everything that is bad, that it is still such a moral quandary for Sisko for how to react, and that it's not clear cut even in the face of this, and that's what makes it so interesting to discuss and to make all these comparisons, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
And only at the end do you find out, oh, well, he's half prophet. So he actually, maybe everything he's doing is just, he has no idea while all this is happening that his cause is just and righteous, right? He, like you said, he makes those decisions a long time ago. And only at the very end do you find out, well, actually, the prophets are like, well, we kind of knew you were going to do this the whole time.
That is what gets so weird and messed up about being like fourth, fifth dimensional beings, right? It's like when you're
Definitely.
able to experience nonlinear time. I don't know. I don't get it, man.
And it
Yeah.
makes Cisco such a good, the experience of being human, right, is not having access to this knowledge. So only finding out at the very end of all this that he is more than human, I think is very cool. Is a very cool ending to his character. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you want to go around and do our final thoughts and rate this episode?
Sure.
Okay, I'll start. I give this 5 out of 5 applause. It's just one of the best. The writing, it's great plot. The amount of we could have done like 6 episodes of the podcast just on this episode. I think it's everything you want from Trek.
I agree. It's one of the best episodes, like in all of Star Trek. Like, I just can't believe that Cisco, I just like acted the shit out of this.
Yeah.
So well. I love him. He's the best captain. And that's all I have to say about it.
Yeah, 5 out of 5 applause from me. My connection dropped out for a second, so maybe I'm gonna say the same thing as
Sorry.
you just apologies. But yeah, I think the writing is fantastic. The acting is fantastic. We didn't even talk about that first conversation with Cisco and Garrick. Some of the eye acting is just so good, as far as that one scene when Garrick, when he's like, "This is gonna get messy. Are you sure you want to do this?" And he like gets out of his chair and like pivots his like shoulders without ever breaking the look in his eyes. Like things like that are just incredible. And again, all the philosophical and like political historical allusions. There's just so much material in this episode.
Yeah, I think we are all in agreement. 5 out of 5 applause. This is an outstanding episode. I agree with everything that everyone has said. The acting, the writing. It's interesting to think about how many fan favorites are in this episode. Garrick is not in a ton of episodes, but there's a reason that he's a fan favorite, because makes all this amazing stuff happen. Quark is a big feature of this episode. Not a lot of Odo time, but there still is a nice use of the crew as a sort of chorus, backing up Cisco and commenting in between as he's going through his stuff. But it's really a tour de force performance between Avery Brooks and I forget his name, the guy who plays Garrick.
Andrew Robinson.
Oh man. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And then Jeffrey Combs is in it too. We get our little Wayoon.
Oh yeah.
And no love for Damar. We got a little bit of Damar.
Oh, yeah.
Little.
I
Tiny
couldn't
bit
help,
of Damar.
Maybe this is just because I haven't watched a lot of DS9 recently, but I couldn't help but remark at how good the Cardassian makeup looked. I love how they make the ears look like reptile ears in the way that they kind of smooth out the jawline into the base of the ear so that it looks like there's just a little hole on the side of their head, kind of.
Yeah. And their shoulders, that's the shoulders of the Cardassians really helps you, like, yeah, I don't know, believe they exist. And they're not just humans with makeup, I think.
Yeah. This is peak Trek at this moment.
Mhm.
And I think there's that moment that is very memeable in, is it First Contact, when Picard smashes the glass and says no or something like that.
Yeah.
The image I get there and the image of Sisko holding the glass and saying I can live with it are similar sorts of like deep moments in Star Trek that reverberate out into the popular consciousness. And yeah, if you want to see why Sisko is a badass who is willing to stand, I mean, all the captains do dirty shit, right? No one follows the Prime Directive 100% of the time. That's why they're the
Some
Star
of
Trek
them almost none of the time.
Yeah, there's a reason this is the stories they want us to see on the TV and not the ones that are just in Starfleet records.
Yeah.
But Sisko is such from the very beginning of DS9, he is seen in contrast to Picard with the whole thing about Picard killing his wife or getting his wife killed. And this is such an un-Picard thing. I mean, I guess Picard does it sometimes. I don't know. This is just, we can see, the sort of episode you can talk about forever that only seems to ring more true as time passes. And I want to thank you, Kenny. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Bloodwine Boys.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Please, we'll definitely have you back for a future episode because we got to talk about that. But where can people find your other your work and your amazing podcast?
Great. So my podcast is called The Movements, a podcast history of the masses. It is leftist, Marxist, mostly Marxist, but leftist political history. I've done series on the Russian Revolution, the colonization of Palestine, the Spanish Civil War. I'm currently working on the Guatemalan and Cuban revolutions. Both of those countries' stories as being sort of like a stand-in for Latin America during the Cold War. The new episode, we were on a hiatus for a while, but the new episode is coming out tomorrow, which will be Thanksgiving.
So that'll be like last week or the week before when people are listening to this now.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, go check out The Movements.
Yes, it's a great show. I'm also an audiobook narrator. I don't have any, most of my titles are not under my real name. But if anybody likes vampire romances, Eddie Herrera, look him up on Audible.
Awesome.
I get royalties. So if you like vampire, gay vampire romance, I'm your guy, Eddie Herrera.
Hell yes.
Well, Mr. Herrera, this has been so much fun. I just got to say thank you and see you later.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks and see you later.
Oh, wait, guys, now I'm picturing LBJ like sitting with a drink in his hand, like after the Gulf of Tonkin, being like, I can live with it.
He wouldn't have felt bad.
Fire. There was probable fire from the North Vietnamese detected. It was probably there.
It was probably there. All right. Well, on that note, thanks.
Soda Bag Studios.